An October evening in 20 enveloped Los Angeles in a chill as Keanu Reeves, dressed in his usual modesty, a black jacket and jeans, crossed the threshold of a luxury boutique hotel. In his tired appearance, few recognized the owner of this oasis created with love and the hope of warmth and hospitality. But it was not kindness that greeted him that evening, but sobering abruptness. "Excuse me, sir." Amanda, the receptionist, a woman with a sharp eye and a face marked by time, mouthed, "Do you even have a reservation? We don't let just anyone in here." Bewildered, Keanu pulled a reservation confirmation out of his pocket. Amanda rolled her eyes like he was an annoying fly. "People like you think they can just show up at places like this. This isn't a hostel," she muttered, ignoring the tension in the air. Keanu remained calm, though a shadow flickered in his eyes. "This is not a place for spontaneous bookings." Her words were as cold as the winter wind. "We cater to the elite, celebrities, CEOs. I suggest you look elsewhere." By the fireplace, in the glow of the flames, sat a young couple, Emily and David, high school friends, immersed in a romantic atmosphere. Their quiet evening was broken by a loud dialogue. "Wasn't that him?" Emily whispered, squinting her eyes. "It can't be," David replied, shaking his head incredulously. Amanda continued her attacks, blind to the discomfort spreading around her. "Look," she said dismissively, "we have an image to maintain. If you can't afford it—" She stammered, giving Keanu a sizing glance. "Do you do that with all your guests?" "Only the ones who don't fit in here," she grinned, not noticing the hotel manager, James, enter the lobby. James's face went pale at the sight of Keanu. "What's going on here?" He panicked as he approached. "Solving a problem," Amanda waved him away, ignoring Keanu. "It's not just a guest," James whispered, his whole body shaking. "It's Mr. Reeves. He owns this hotel." There was silence in the lobby. Amanda turned pale, as if she'd seen a ghost, realizing the weight of her words. Keanu remained silent, but the truth spoke for itself. Emily and David exchanged shocked looks. Their romantic evening turned into an unforgettable spectacle. Amanda stepped back, realizing that her fate was now being decided. Petrified, she stood before Keanu, her self-confidence shattered, guilt and fear red in her eyes. Curiosity and confusion lingered in the living room. Keanu took a deep breath, his calmness hiding the storm of emotions. Looking Amanda straight in the eyes, he said quietly, "I believe in kindness. It's the foundation of everything we've built here. Everyone deserves respect, no matter who they are or what they look like." Amanda's lips quivered and tears began to gather in her eyes. She realized her mistake, her bias not only for her guest, but for the man. "Mr. Reeves, yeah, I'm so sorry," she mumbled, her voice breaking. Keanu didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked around at everyone present. His gaze lingered on Emily and David, their faces expressing admiration and hope. "I wasn't always someone who could afford places like this," Keanu finally said, his voice full of sincerity. "There were times when I didn't know where I would sleep, let alone where I would eat. That's why I wanted this hotel to be different, a place where people felt welcome." Emily and David's hearts clenched. They'd read about his struggles, about losing loved ones. Hearing him speak with such vulnerability was completely different. Amanda burst into tears. "I don't know what came over me. I let pride cloud my judgment," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please forgive me." Keanu nodded, but didn't forgive right away. "Words are easy," he said. "It's the actions that matter. How you treat people when no one is looking defines you." James stepped forward, his face contorted with shame. "Mr. Reeves, I take responsibility for what happened today. It's not what we're striving for. I promise there will be changes." Keanu nodded, but his attention was on Amanda. "The world needs more kindness," he said quietly, "and it starts with us." Emily couldn't hold back her tears any longer. It was unbelievable how someone who had been through so much. As Keanu was about to leave the lobby, a little boy timidly approached him, holding his mother's hand. He sat quietly with his family in the corner, watching everything that was going on. "Mr. Reeves," he said in a trembling voice. Keanu leaned over to meet his gaze. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. The boy held out a crumpled piece of paper to him. "This is from my dad," he said. "He always said you were the nicest man in Hollywood." I guess he was right. Tears filled Keanu's eyes as he carefully unfolded the paper. It was a simple drawing of a superhero with the inscription, "To Mr. Reeves, the real superhero." There was silence in the hall again, but now it was filled not with shock, but with admiration. "He must have been a wonderful man," Keanu whispered. Thank you for sharing that with me. It means more than you know. Emily and David wiped away tears. Their anniversary was now sealed in a story they would never forget. A story of humility, forgiveness, and the unwavering power of kindness. As Keanu got up to leave, he turned to his guests. This place isn't about luxury or status. His voice was calm but determined. It's about people. Keanu patted the boy's shoulder gently before standing up. Still holding the drawing in his hands, he looked at the boy's mother, who had tears rolling down her cheeks. She said, "Thank you," silently, overwhelmed by the simple yet profound moment her son had just experienced. Amanda, still shaking from the gravity of her actions, watched Keanu interact with the boy. Something deep inside her changed, as if a pain she hadn't realized for years had been laid bare. Amanda had spent so much time proving her place in elite circles that she had forgotten what it meant to be human. Keanu's words echoed in her head. How you treat people when no one is looking defines you. The boy and his mother started to walk away, but Keanu called out to them. "Wait," he said, his voice quiet but filled with emotion. He pulled a small keychain out of his pocket, a souvenir from the filming of one of his movies. It was old and worn, but it still glimmered dimly under the warm lights of the lobby. "Your dad must have been a wonderful man," Keanu said, dropping down to the boy's level again. "I want you to have this. It's from a movie I made a long time ago. It's not much, but maybe it will remind you that heroes come in many forms." The boy's eyes widened as he accepted the gift. His little fingers squeezed it tightly. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Keanu barely smiled, but the pain in his eyes was evident as the boy walked away. Keanu stood up, his gaze following the child and his mother until they disappeared behind the revolving doors. Emily, still watching from the corner with David, leaned closer and whispered, "He carries so much you can see it in his eyes." David nodded. "But look how he uses it. He turns his pain into something beautiful." Keanu walked back to the front desk where Amanda was still standing, her hands rubbing each other nervously. She opened her mouth to apologize again, but Keanu held up a hand to stop her. "I'm not interested in apologizing," he said softly. "I'm interested in change." Amanda nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'll be better, I swear." Keanu nodded slightly. "We all make mistakes. It's what we do afterward that matters." Suddenly, from the corner of the room came the soft melodic sound of a piano. An elderly man in his 70s, who had previously been sitting quietly at the hotel bar, walked over to the piano. His fingers glided across the keys with surprising dexterity, filling the room with a mesmerizing rendition of Clair de Lune. Keanu turned to the music, his face lighting up as he recognized the man whose name tag read George Maintenance. George, immersed in the melody, didn't notice the effect he was having on those present. Keanu approached the piano with a nostalgic smile. Keanu applauded quietly, causing the older man to turn around. "Stunned," George laughed, scratching the back of his head. "I haven't played in a while. I'm more of a trumpet player." "That's for sure," Keanu replied. "My wife loved that piece," George added. "Played it for her every night before she left." Keanu replied softly. "She must have been happy to have someone who loved her so much." George smiled weakly, his eyes glittering. "I was happy." The room fell into thoughtful silence. The gravity of the moment pierced the hearts of everyone present. Keanu put his hand on George's shoulder. "Thank you for sharing this with us," he said quietly. George nodded, his voice full of emotion. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves, not only for listening, but for being a man who sees people." Keanu took a step back, his thoughts returning to George's words. He looked around the hall, noticing Amanda, Emily, and David, the boy and his mother standing by the glass doors, and George at the piano. For a moment, the weight of loss, pain, love, and hope was almost unbearable. And yet, in the midst of it all, there was a profound beauty. He turned to the guests and staff. The hardest part of being human, his voice was firm but full of unwavering determination, is bearing the weight of all that you have lost. But that's what makes love so powerful. That's what keeps us moving forward. Emily, now openly weeping, reached out to touch David's hand. Their anniversary took on a deeper meaning. Across the room, Amanda was quietly wiping her eyes, promising herself she wouldn't let anyone else feel unnoticed. Keanu, still holding the boy's drawing in his hand, headed for the elevators. His footsteps were quiet, his presence modest, but he left behind him a room full of people forever changed by the man they had underestimated. When the elevator doors closed behind Keanu, the hallway remained silent. The gravity of the moment hung in the air like an invisible thread connecting everyone who witnessed it. Amanda sank into the nearest chair, hiding her face in her hands. She had never felt so small, so vulnerable, but at the same time, something inside her moved, a deep, painful need to be a better person, to rediscover the kindness she had lost somewhere. Emily and David sat silently by the fireplace, holding each other's hands. "I wonder," Emily sighed, her voice trembling, "do people ever realize how much pain he carries?" David shook his head. "I don't think so. People see an actor, a celebrity," he said. "They don't see a man who has rebuilt himself from the ashes more than once." On the top floor, Keanu entered his private suite. He placed the boy's drawing on the table by the window and stared at it for a long time. The child's words echoed in his head. "My daddy said you're the nicest man in Hollywood." Keanu sat up slowly, his hands trembling, as he leaned over the paper. His thoughts took him back to his own father, who had left when Keanu was just a boy. He'd tried for years to fill that void, but no matter how much he reached or where he went, it remained. Then there was Jennifer, his soulmate, who should have been sitting next to him now, laughing at the absurdity of life and sharing stories about the people they met. Her absence was a wound that never healed, and yet he carried her memory within him in what he did, seeking to honor the love they shared. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. "Come in," he said, his voice hoarse. James, the manager, entered the room. His face was concerned. "Mr. Reeves, I wanted to check on you. I know there have been a lot of glitches." "It's okay, James," Keanu said. "I'm fine." But James wasn't so sure. He thought for a moment before he spoke again. "You know, when we opened this hotel, you said something to me that I've remembered ever since. You said that people don't come to places like this because of the rooms or the amenities. They come because they're looking for a connection, a moment that will remind them why life is worth living." Keanu nodded, his eyes staring off into the distance. James continued, his voice softening. "I think you gave everyone in this hallway a moment like that tonight. Even Amanda, especially Amanda." Keanu laughed weakly. "I hope she learns a lesson from this." James stepped closer, his expression serious. "You're more than just the owner of this place, Keanu. You take something more with you after you leave this place." Keanu looked at James, his throat constricted by unexpressed emotion. "Sometimes I wonder," he admitted quietly, "if I have more to give." James shook his head. "You have more than most people, and that's because you understand loss. You've lived through it and turned it into something that heals others." Keanu didn't answer, but his silence spoke volumes. Later that night, as the hotel subsided and the lights of the city flickered outside his window, Keanu sat at his desk. The boy's drawing still lay before him. He picked up a pen and wrote a simple message on the back of the paper. "To the boy who reminded me that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, thank you for being my hero today." He folded the paper neatly and placed it in an envelope. The next morning, he handed it to the front desk, asking that it be delivered to the boys' room before they left the hotel. Downstairs, Amanda came in early. Her eyes were red from sleepless reflection. During the night, she found James waiting for her with a cup of hot coffee. "You're here early," he said, handing her the cup. She nodded, her voice shaking. "I want a fresh start. I need it." James studied her for a while before nodding approvingly. "Then let's make this a big day." As Amanda took her place behind the counter, the lobby began to fill with morning bustle. Guests came and went, some rushing to appointments, others lingering over coffee and pastries. And in the midst of it all, Amanda spotted a young boy and his mother heading for the door. The boy was clutching an envelope in his hands, his face glowing with joy. He stopped abruptly and turned around. His eyes ran around the room until they stopped on Amanda. He waved his hand at her, a small but sincere gesture of forgiveness and connection. Amanda felt a lump in her throat as she waved back at him. A tear rolled down her cheek. In that moment, she realized that it wasn't just Keanu who had given the boy a gift. It was the boy who had given all of them a chance to be better. And somewhere upstairs, Keanu was sitting at a window, watching the city come to life. The boy's words and drawing were forever imprinted in his heart. The boy and his mother left the hotel, the morning sun illuminating the city with golden light as they crossed the street. The boy clutched the envelope like a treasure, smiling at his mother. "I told you, Mom," he said, his voice full of excitement. "He's a real superhero." Inside the hotel, Amanda discreetly wiped away her tears and returned to her duties. She had a quiet determination now, a determination to embody the kindness that Keanu had shown her, even if she didn't deserve it. James noticed her transformation, the subtle warmth in her voice as she greeted the guests, and he realized that Keanu's words had paid off. Upstairs, Keanu stood at the window, the city stretching out in front of him. He watched the boy and his mother until they disappeared into the crowd. His chest felt heavy, but for the first time in weeks, the pain of loss seemed different. It reminded him of his own pain, the moments when he needed someone to believe in him, and how much it hurt when no one was there for him. Keanu exhaled deeply. The weight of the past was pressing down on him like an old wound. He remembered Jennifer, her laughter, her dreams, the life they were supposed to spend together. He remembered his sister, who had fought so hard against leukemia, and how helpless he felt watching her suffer. And yet, despite the loss, he was still standing, still trying. He walked over to a small safe in the corner of the room and opened it. Inside was a collection of mementos, a picture of Jennifer, a bracelet his sister had given him, a worn copy of a book his late friend River Phoenix had loved. He added the boy's drawing to the collection, placing it carefully between the pages of the book. As he closed the safe, his phone rang. It was a message from James. "The events of last night reminded us all why we're here. Amanda wanted me to tell you that she is ready to change. I think we're all ready." Keanu smiled weakly, replying with a simple, "Welcome. This is just a wave of kindness. Let's keep going." Later, as Keanu prepared to leave the hotel, he made one last stop in the lobby. The staff gathered around him, their expressions full of gratitude and admiration. Amanda stepped forward, her hands nervously intertwined in front of her. "Mr. Reeves," she began, her voice shaky but sincere, "I just want to say thank you, not just for last night, but for giving me a second chance. I promise I'll do my best." Keanu nodded, his gaze steady. "It's not about being perfect," he said. "It's about being better than yesterday. Keep trying." When he stepped outside, the fresh fall air greeted him. The streets were bustling with life, and for a moment, Keanu felt like just another face in the crowd, a feeling he appreciated. He pulled out his phone and opened the notes, typing a few words before putting it back in his pocket. Sometimes the smallest moments remind us of the biggest truths. Kindness matters, love heals, and even in the darkest of times, we can be someone's light. As he walked away, blending into the city, the boy's drawing and words stayed with him, reminding him that the characters are not just on the screen, they are in the quiet acts of love and kindness that bind one soul to another. And maybe it was in light of such a loss that Keanu realized he hadn't lost the ability to keep on giving, to keep on loving. Sometimes that was enough.